The first time Emily Parker felt something shift inside her. It wasn't dramatic. There was no music, no sudden realization, no moment that screamed, "This will change everything." It was quiet, subtle, almost harmless. And that was what made it dangerous. It happened on a cold Monday evening in Boston, when the city felt tired and gray, and Emily was standing by the window of her townhouse, watching headlights slide across wet streets. Her husband Mark had texted her an hour earlier, running. "Late dinner tonight with my boss. You'll finally meet him." Emily sighed, half smiling. Mark talked about his boss all the time. Daniel, right? The man who gave him a promotion when no one else believed in him. The man who spoke calmly in meetings and never raised his voice. The man Mark admired more than he admitted. Emily wasn't excited. She was polite about it, supportive. That was her role. She reheated leftovers, changed into a simple dress, and told herself it was just another dinner. She had no idea how wrong she was. The restaurant was warm and crowded, filled with low voices and soft music. When Daniel arrived, he didn't rush in or command attention. He walked calmly, confidently, like someone who knew exactly where he belonged. Mark stood up quickly. "Daniel, this is my wife, Emily." Daniel smiled and held out his hand. "I've heard a lot about you." His handshake was brief and respectful. His eyes were kind, not intense, not charming in an obvious way. Just steady. Emily felt it then. A small pause in her breath. A flicker of awareness she pushed away immediately. They sat. They talked. Nothing unusual happened. No lines were crossed. No secrets shared. Yet Emily noticed things she hadn't planned to notice. Daniel listened more than he spoke. He laughed quietly. He asked Emily about her work, and when she answered, he didn't interrupt or drift away. He stayed with her words. Mark was animated, excited, full of stories about work. Daniel nodded, encouraged him, praised his effort without sounding superior. On the drive home, Mark was glowing. "He's a good man," he said. "I'm lucky to work for him," Emily agreed. She meant it. But when she lay in bed later, staring at the ceiling while Mark slept, her mind replayed moments from the dinner she didn't want to remember. She told herself it was nothing, just admiration, respect. Life moved on, days filled with work, errands, routines. Emily returned to her job at the community library. She shelved books, helped students, smiled at regulars. Everything looked the same from the outside. But Daniel became part of the edges of her life. There were group dinners, company events, invitations that included spouses. Emily found herself preparing more than usual, choosing outfits more carefully, then feeling guilty for doing so. She tried to be honest with herself. Her marriage wasn't broken. Mark wasn't cruel or distant. It was kind, predictable, loving in steady ways. But somewhere along the way, comfort had replaced closeness. Conversations stayed on schedules, and Bill's dreams were postponed. Daniel, without trying, represented something else. Not excitement, not temptation. Awareness. At a charity fundraiser in Cambridge, Emily stood beside Daniel while Mark spoke with coworkers. The room buzzed with conversation and soft laughter. "You do important work," Daniel said. "Libraries matter more than people realize." Emily smiled, surprised. "Most people don't see it that way." "I do," he replied simply. That was all. No flirtation. No hint of anything improper. Yet Emily felt seen in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. She hated herself for noticing. She began avoiding him when she could, standing near other spouses, finding excuses to step away. But avoidance didn't erase thoughts. It sharpened them. One Saturday afternoon at a company picnic by the river, Mark was called away for a work issue. Emily sat alone at a picnic table, watching the water move slowly, thinking about nothing and everything at once. Daniel approached, holding 2 bottles of water. He placed one on the table and sat across from her, leaving respectful space. "Boston looks different from here," he said. "It does," Emily answered. They talked about small things, the weather, the city, books. Daniel mentioned a novel he had read recently. Emily's eyes lit up before she could stop herself. "You read that?" she asked. "I did." He smiled. "It stayed with me." Something in his voice made her chest tighten. She stood up abruptly when Mark returned, laughing loudly, acting normal. That night, Emily cried quietly in the bathroom, unsure why tears were falling. She wasn't in love. She wasn't planning anything. But she was afraid. Afraid of how easy it was to feel something she hadn't asked for. Weeks passed. Autumn arrived, leaves turned gold and red. Emily felt like she was holding her breath, waiting for something to happen, even though she didn't want it to. The breaking point came sooner than she expected. Mark's company planned a weekend conference in Toronto. Spouses were invited. Emily agreed to go, hoping the change of scenery might clear her head. The hotel overlooked the water. The city. Lights were bright and unfamiliar. On the first evening, Mark was delayed in meetings. Emily sat alone in the hotel lounge, nursing a cup of tea. Daniel walked in and noticed her immediately. He hesitated, then approached. "Is Mark joining you?" he asked later. She said, sat down, careful, composed. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence wasn't awkward. It was honest. "I don't want to make things uncomfortable," Daniel said quietly. "But I feel like something's been weighing on you." Emily looked at him, heart pounding. This was the moment she had been afraid of. She chose her words carefully. "Some feelings surprise us," she said. "That doesn't mean we have to follow them." Daniel nodded slowly. "I agree." Their eyes met. Understanding passed between them without being spoken. Mark walked in moments later, cheerful and unaware. Emily stood up quickly, relief flooding her chest. That night, alone in bed, Emily finally understood what had been happening. It wasn't about Daniel. It was about herself. About noticing what she missed. About realizing how fragile boundaries could be if she didn't guard them. She made a choice then. Quiet, firm. The story wasn't over yet. The line had been drawn. Emily woke before sunrise, her heart already heavy, as if the night had delivered a truth she could no longer ignore. The hotel room in Toronto was quiet, the city still asleep, but inside her everything was loud. She knew this day would matter, not because something would happen, but because something had to end. She stood by the window and watched the sky slowly change color. She didn't feel guilty in the way movies describe guilt. She felt responsible. Feelings had come without permission, but now she had to decide what kind of person she wanted to be. Mark stirred behind her, smiling when he saw her. "Big day," he said. "Daniel wants to introduce me to the regional team." She kissed his cheek and wished him luck. Her smile held, but her mind stayed steady. She had already chosen. The conference hall was busy, filled with voices and movement. Emily stayed mostly to herself, greeting people politely, keeping distance where it mattered. She felt lighter than she had in weeks. Clear. Later that afternoon, Daniel found her near the coffee station. He looked tired but calm. "I wanted to say something," he said, "not to reopen anything." Just to be clear, Emily met his eyes. So did I. They stepped aside, away from the noise. There was no tension now, only honesty. "What we felt," Daniel said, "was real, but not meant to grow." Emily nodded. "And we didn't let it." Daniel smiled, respectful and grateful. "Thank you for your strength." "No," she replied. "Thank you for yours." That was it. No drama, no promises, no lingering words. They returned to their lives, separate and clean. When the conference ended, Emily and Mark walked through downtown Toronto together. The air was cool, the streets alive. Mark talked about ideas, plans, hopes. Emily listened in a way she hadn't in months. She realized something simple and powerful. She wanted to be present again. Back in Boston, life settled into familiar patterns, but Emily didn't return to old habits. She spoke more, asked deeper questions, invited Mark into conversations they had avoided for years. One evening over dinner, she said, "Do you ever feel like we stopped dreaming out loud?" Mark looked surprised, then thoughtful. Sometimes, he admitted. They talked long after the plates were cleared, about fears, about routines, about what they wanted next. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. Daniel remained part of Mark's work life, nothing more. He was polite, distant, professional. Emily respected him for that. She also let go of what might have been, understanding it had served its purpose. And nothing more. Weeks passed, then months. Winter came. Emily found joy in small things again. Morning walks, quiet laughter, the comfort of shared silence that no longer felt empty. One snowy evening, Mark reached for her hand on the couch. "I feel closer to you lately," he said. "So do I," she answered, and meant it. She thought about how easily life could shift, how close she had come to stepping into something that would have changed everything. Not because it was wrong, but because it wasn't hers to keep. The lessons stayed with her. At a spring company gathering, Emily saw Daniel across the room. Their eyes met briefly. They exchanged a nod, nothing more. That moment felt complete. Later that night, as Emily and Mark walked home under soft city lights, she realized the story she feared was never meant to be a scandal or a secret. It was a reminder. Love wasn't always loud. Sometimes it was a quiet decision made every day. And she had chosen well.